everybody. Hello, fellow Macadmins. Welcome. Thank you. Welcome to my session, We're Wired Differently, how to talk about your neurodiversity with your employer and coworkers. Some of you may remember me from last year's session, Squirrel 2.0. It was with Jason, and we did a follow-up to his previous session as well. Unfortunately, Jason wasn't able to make it this year, so I'm flying solo, but hopefully you guys will enjoy this. For those who don't know me, as I said, my name is Roger Herling. I'm currently the Apple Jamf endpoint engineer for McGraw-Hill Education. For those who don't know McGraw-Hill, they make textbooks or digital learning products or whatever our latest catchphrase is. I have over 20 years at IT, and for the last about 12 years or so plus, I've been dedicated just to the Mac OS space. And for the purposes of this talk, I was diagnosed with ADHD at 19. So, want to make one brief announcement. Try to save your questions for the questions and answer session. I've allowed quite a bit of time for discussion in this because this group tends to want to discuss things afterwards, which is great, and I love that. So I built that in. So if you have a question, jot it down. All right. A couple disclaimers as we get started here. One, I'm not a doctor, and I am definitely not a psychiatrist or psychologist or a social worker or any of those things. These are related to my personal experiences only. This is not affiliated with my company in any way, shape, or form. And what has worked for me may not work for you. Your mileage may vary. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to define the term neurodiversity. What is neurodiversity? All right. We're going to discuss some workplace challenges, how you can advocate for yourself and request accommodations, your rights under your rights and the ADA, so American Disabilities Act. We'll talk about that. How you can advocate for others within your organization or friends, and then we're going to have open discussion and QA. All right. So, understanding neurodiversity. All right, neurodiversity was a term that was coined in the late 90s. It's all about the idea that neurological differences like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, any kind of wiring issues up there are natural variations in the human brain and not flaws or disorders to be fixed. All right, so it's a way of being inclusive to everybody. And as much as it's inclusive, it does break people up into two buckets. All right. And those are neurotypical and neurodivergent. Right? Your neurotypical brain, good old-fashioned brain. This one happens to be blue. Thank you, ChatGPT. So your normal brain, right? On the other hand, you have people who are neurodivergent. As I said, ADHD, OCD, all that stuff. Yeah, our brains kind of tend to look like that, right? Not really clearly defined paths. Everything kind of goes all over the place, all right? I like to describe this as kind of like highways, right? So your neurotypical brain, straight thinking. A to B to C to D to E, follow the path. Don't deviate from the path. The neurodivergent brain, we don't go in straight lines. We don't even know what straight lines are. Our brains are constantly moving in all sorts of directions at every minute of every day. I kind of equate it to, I don't know, there's a constant white noise in my head personally. Everybody's experience is different, but the bottom line is, though, we may not, as neurodivergents, we also can get from point A to point E, right? But we may go through point X or Z or Q or 1 or any number of things before we get there, but we will get there, and we will get there successfully, and we will get there on time. It just may not be the way that everybody else does it. Many of you guys probably know somebody who works at AD. Let's make a show of hands. How many here identify themselves as neurodivergent? Okay, pretty much everybody. All right, and anybody consider themselves neurotypical? Okay, nothing wrong with any of those. So here's the thing, right now, the statistics I was able to find show that about 20% of, at least 20% of IT professionals are neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form. We're kind of attracted to this career field, so to speak. And we are really good at it because we have some superpowers that we'll talk about later. It's not just that we're my favorite phrase right now is, my brain isn't broken, it's just wired differently. It's a good one to think. So when we talk about, as we continue to talk about neurodiversity, I want you to remember that we're not labeling people or putting them into boxes. It's really just a way to differentiate the average, the average curve versus the non-average curve, right? So we're just statistics. So neurotypical, statistically the same. Neurodivergent, we're kind of all over the map. Right? Let's take a look at what do those differences look like, starting with something that all of us neurodivergent folks deal with, executive function disorder, or deficient executive function. And what is executive function? Well, executive function is your brain's ability to plan, prioritize, and organize. If you're neurotypical, you may not even notice how often you're using those particular functions of your brain. They come second nature to you. But they include task initiation, self-monitoring, so your ability to look at yourself and say, hey, wait, did I do that right? All right. Attention control, pretty obvious, right? Working memory, planning and prioritization, emotional control, organization, and impulse control. Now, this makes up your executive function. And most of us who are neurodivergent, we suffer from some sort of deficiency in one or more of those categories that you see up there. Some other things that tend to affect those of us who are neurospicy, as we like to call it, is emotional dysregulation. All right, so that's one of those executive functions. But this is really, it tends to present itself as emotional responses that may seem excessive compared to the situation. And individuals with emotional dysregulation may have difficulty calming down. They may avoid difficult feelings, focus on the negative. All right. So again, responses that seem excessive, difficulty calming down, focusing on the negative. All right. The other one is the big one that I suffer from a lot and have in the past, and to this day, somewhat a little bit, rejection sensitive disorder. Okay. This is generally in a response to some sort of slight, sudden emotional outburst, triggered by a real or perceived, and I underline perceived here for a very important reason, because one of the things that I think a lot of neurotypical individuals out there don't seem to understand is that we perceive the world around us in a very different way than neurotypicals do. We are more aware of everything around us, right? You know, I can hear all the noises upstairs. I can hear everything in this room, right? I can feel every piece of clothing that I'm wearing right now because I happen to have a sensitivity to clothes, all right? So, as I said, perceived criticism or rejection can cause us to go socially withdrawn, right? We hide. We don't want to be around people. Low self-esteem. It's a big one. I suffered from that for a very, 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 very long time in my life. And we'll got some stories a little later to talk about that. Self-doubt and rumination. How many of you have ever experienced this? Overthinking, unable to let things go. You kind of get stuck on that one idea and then, yeah. So that's rejection sensitive dysphoria. Now, I did say that we did have a superpower. And that superpower is hyperfocus. Thank you, ChatGPT, for Hyperfocus Man here, issue number 1. Sorry, issue number 10 cents. So, you know, yeah, it's close, right? This went through a couple iterations. This is the best one they came up with. But so what is hyperfocus? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's our ability to focus in like a laser beam. But it only comes about in certain times, right? What we're focusing on has to have high intrinsic value, or we have to be passionate about it. So for me, IT work, I'm very passionate about it. I love it. Documentation, don't love that part of it so much. So that sometimes gets a little hard to get into, right? Anything that's novel or a challenge can also trigger a hyperfocus state in neurodivergent individuals. Sense of urgency. This is a big one for me. I did this entire slide deck in 3 days. Last week. So, let's see, how many weeks or months was it from when I actually, got accepted to speak? So,
those days were Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Exactly. And you know what? Even up until yesterday, I was making some slight changes on this. So but that's normal. But I actually didn't really start building this presentation out. I until last week. Now you may say, well, Roger, you could have done all this work earlier and you would have made it a lot easier for yourself. I was like, no, for me, it would have been much more difficult to do it the quote unquote normal way. Right? For me, I need that sense of urgency in order to drive the dopamine and all the other stuff, chemicals in my brain to say, hey, all right, we got to work on this. We got to get this done now. This is really important. I'm going to go speak in front of, 50 people. I need to get this done, right? Excuse me. But hyperfocus does have weaknesses as well. And these are ones that you should want your neurotypical colleagues to understand. And sometimes it's hard for them to understand. And since we're on the superhero kick, these would be vulnerabilities, right? So, Superman's vulnerable to kryptonite. Well, we're vulnerable to interruptions. That hyperfocus state is very fragile and can be broken by something as basic as a doorbell, some wind blowing by, knock on the door, my 9-year-old coming in begging for Robux, any of those things. They you're also really, this is a big one, time blindness. You're very vulnerable to time blindness when you're in a hyperfocus state. So when we are in a hyperfocus state, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're hyper-focused. So everything from the outside world melts away, disappears. We're not really aware of it. Time doesn't exist. And that can be both a good thing and a bad thing. We also might neglect our basic needs. Get into a hyperfocus state, I can skip that shower 3 days later. You're smelling pretty ripe, and you might want to go take a break. But and the biggest one is burnout. Too much hyperfocus is a bad thing, just like too much work is a bad thing, right? So we've talked a little bit about neurodiversity. We've talked a little bit about some deficits, and we've talked about some of our superpowers. So let's talk about some workplace challenges. By show of hands, how many people in this room have ever had a problem with work that they associate with their neurodiversity? Okay. How many of you have had issues with superiors not understanding? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about a very personal story, and it involves somebody in this room. I have permission to talk about this. So I've been in IT for over 20 years, as I said. And in those 20 years, I've had ups and downs, and I'll talk about some of the downs a little bit later in this talk. But one of the biggest ups I actually experienced recently. We had made some changes to our manager structure. My boss became my director, and one of my colleagues became my boss. And we didn't get along very well. We had a bit of a communication issue. Frequently we get interrupted with things. A lot of the things that to me were triggers for my RSD and all the other things we've talked about, were happening. And it was frustrating. And I hit that emotional wall and I lost it. We had a full-on argument, cut the Zoom, that was it. And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, great, I've screwed up another job. This one's done now. And it really put me into a funk for a bit. And then I did something that I haven't done in my career, which is I sent an email to my director. And I said, hey, I'm having a problem with my manager, and we're not able to communicate. Can you help? Those 3 words are the most important you need to remember. Can you help? Ask for help, right? My director set up a meeting. My boss was on the call. I was on the call. He was on the call. And I just talked. I talked about how I think. I talked about how I work. I talked about the things that I need to do my job effectively and what I need from my, my boss and what I expect, And I'm sitting here, thinking during this call, my boss really isn't saying anything. He barely spoke up on the call. Maybe he said hi. I get off that call after kind of exposing myself and saying, hey, this is my ADHD. These things trigger me. These things help me. These things, laid it all out on the table. Things got better almost immediately. Then I think it was a week or 2 later, my boss sent me a message on Teams and said he watched my presentation from last year. And that to me was, it frankly, it was emotional. I mean, I'm like, wow, you actually went through the motions. You didn't just feed me lip service saying, I'm going to work on this. You actually are working on it. You're learning about my neurodiversity. He asked me if I could recommend any books that he could read. So it's not impossible to find a good workplace, but it can be difficult. But this brings me to the biggest point here, self-advocacy. The only person who can make things better or to start the process of making things better is you. So when we talk about self-advocacy, how do you start? Like, what do you do, right? I'm stuck in this job, I hate it, my boss is an asshole, whatever it is. What do you do? Well, first you're going to say, well, why do I need to disclose? Why do I need to talk about this with my employer or my coworkers? Because it may not be a manager, it may be somebody you just work with. How much should I tell them? Do I need to be specific? Do I need to say, yes, I have ADHD, and this is my subtype, and this is... What do I expect to get out of bringing this up? Because you can't come into this and say, I have ADHD, or I have ASD, or I have all this stuff, and not give them something to work with, to not give them something to help you succeed. Are you looking for accommodations? And we're going to talk about those in a bit. And the last is, who do I talk to? Do you feel comfortable talking to that direct supervisor? Do you need to get somebody higher up involved? Do you need to get HR involved? Right? These are very important questions. So I mentioned, what do we expect on accommodations? Well, there's something called reasonable accommodations. That comes out of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which we're going to talk in a couple of slides. But what is a reasonable accommodation? It can be anything from acquiring or modifying equipment or devices within your workspace. So if you have a physical disability or you can get that modified. Even something as simple as I'm colorblind. Can I get materials that are formatted for me to be able to see them, right? Job restructuring is an option. Maybe you need to change your responsibilities. Maybe those responsibilities don't necessarily fit your particular neurodiversity. Maybe you're not, there has to be some bit of a match here. You can't shove a square peg into a round hole, right? Maybe you can do a part-time or a modified work schedule. Maybe you can be moved to a vacant position. Or you can adjust or modify examinations, training materials, or policies, right? Maybe you need to do corporate training, but you can't do it with everybody around you, so maybe you need headphones or something, right? Providing readers or interpreters. This is less likely these days, but if you're in college, this is great. So for those college students, you can actually request note takers, which are a godsend. And thank you to whoever is taking group notes to this. I appreciate that. And making the workplace ready, accessible, and usable to people with disabilities. So this would be your standard accommodations, like, hey, I need a wheelchair ramp. I need, I'm on crutches. Can I get a desk moved closer, that kind of thing. One of the things we talked in that list was like a structured work environment, right? So that helps us. Structure is important to those of us with neurodiversity. Not to like some of us like with OCD, structure is everything, right? So if you have OCD, you got to do everything the same way all the time. But to those of us who are on the ADHD or ASD spectrums, consistent routines reduce uncertainty, right? So the more consistent you can make it, the better. Now, I understand we're in IT, things move, things evolve, new technologies are always coming out, new versions of things are always coming out. What I'm talking about is how we go about working with those things. So that can be something as simple as standard meeting times. I know every day I have a 9:30 a.m. meeting. I know every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays I have an 11:30 meeting. Consistency matters, right? Because then I can prepare myself mentally. Some other things. Agendas are set ahead of time. You know, I think we've all been asking for this one for a very long time. I mean, how many of you have been to a meeting to plan a meeting? So, standard communication tools can help with the structure of your environment. So that would be your Slack, your Teams. That can help. Avoid a mixture of text, IM, and email, though. Pick one and stick to it. You know, pick a preferred method. I prefer that you hit me up on Teams, or I prefer that you send me an email, or I prefer you put a ticket in. We can use task management and visuals to organize our work. These are also things that help, right? So this can be something as simple as a notepad that you keep next to your desk, your handwrite in. Or it could be a full-on, you guys could be running a full Scrum shop, right? Having weekly sprints. But those visual schedules really help. One of the things that when I started at McGraw, we didn't really have a structure of how do we track things. And we've been through a couple of iterations of it, and Zane, my boss, can attest to that. But we finally, now we're finally settled on one. Came from the top. A lot of these things have to come from the top down, unfortunately. But sometimes you can you could do things within your own team that may fall outside of the norm for your job. Excuse me. So, a standardized accessibility. One of the best environments I had was working in a Scrum environment because it was so structured. My first foray into it was working with some of the at least one of the persons in this room. And I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was like, oh, this is going to make things harder and worse. I've never been more productive in my life because it gave me a couple of those triggers for hyperfocus, right? Gave me that sense of urgency. 2-week sprint. I got 2 weeks to get this stuff done, right? And it also showed me, well, this particular task is reliant on this particular task, so I'm holding up somebody else. So that's also a sense of urgency, right? So it really does help to visualize. And some of us might like more text. Some of us might like more like a Kanban board. Your mileage may vary, whatever works for you, right? But this is the most important thing I can say, is stick to it. How many people in this room have tried an organizational system and failed at it repeatedly? Yeah. Yeah. How many have tried more than 5? Okay. Back in the day, I was, tried the Palm Pilots. I was trying, Franklin planners. I tried everything. None of it worked, right? And this is kind of my favorite statement. I have to give Brad Chapman. Unfortunately, he had to leave, but this was one of his bits. Is until there's a ticket, it's just a conversation. And this applies to ticketing, but it also applies to everything else. If you're talking to me about something, hey, let's do this, let's do that. Oh, that's a great idea. And it's not written down somewhere, and I don't have it written down somewhere, the odds are I may not remember it. Not because I don't want to, just because I physically can't, right? Because I need that visual representation of it as well as the audible to process it properly. And that's, for me, that's why I love audiobooks, because I can listen and read at the same time. And yeah. Some more things you can so going on with our reasonable accommodations. There's a couple of work options that you can have, right? diving a little bit deeper into this topic. Flexible schedules is a big one, right? Mental health days. Can't stress this enough, people. Mental health is health. You know, if you're down, depressed, you need a day, you're sick. I don't care what anybody says. You need a day. Right? This is one that I do. I schedule focus time. So throughout the week, I have a couple hour blocks of time that I just black out in my Outlook calendar. Now, I'll take meetings during that time, but when I want to, right? So I can say, hey, Zane, yeah, we could schedule a meeting, just schedule it during that. It says I'm not available, but I'm available, kind of thing, right? You let in who you want. Another big one, remote work. This can go either way. Pre-pandemic, if you had asked me if I wanted to work from home permanently, I would have said, hell no. Too many distractions. Kids running around, everything. Just there's TVs, there's video games, there's too many things for me to want to go do other than this boring task, right? Come pandemic, I proved myself wrong. I found that I was actually able to work better, and I'm going to tell you why, and this will make sense in a bit. Some of it was this. Some of it was sensory for me, all right? As I said earlier, I'm very sensitive to sounds. For those of us who've all worked in cubicles, they're not quiet. Offices are very noisy places. Other things that bother people that maybe you don't consider besides noises, lighting, the buzzing, the buzzing from the fluorescent lights, harsh white lights, too bright. You know, my colleagues always joke whenever I'm on camera that it's always dark behind me because I keep my room dark. I have a blackout curtain that blocks out most of the light, and I just kind of use a desk lamp to illuminate my desk, and I keep my surroundings dark. That helps me visually because I can block out what's around me. All right. Noise, as we've mentioned before. All right. Even the way your seat or desk is oriented can cause sensory issues. Don't face me. As much as I would love a window, don't face me towards a window. I don't want to look out there. Too much going on out there. The real world's out there. I want to be able to focus on my task. If I got a window right there, anything's possible. Smells, again, another thing that can affect people differently. These are only a brief list of the accommodations you can request and you can ask for and things that might make help. But I can't stress enough that you need to have a good understanding of what works for you so you know what you can ask for. So that's kind of for everybody here, take some homework. Think about what makes you focus the best and think about how you might be able to ask for some help with that from your employer if you think you can. Oops, sorry. So as I've told my story before, I had my talk with my boss, things got better, he researched things. That's great, but what happens if that doesn't happen? Right? What happens if you say, I have all these problems and I need help and can you really help me? And your boss says, I don't care. Do your job. I can do it, why can't you do it? That was my personal favorite. Well, that's where the ADA comes in. The ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act, 1990. So, for all those Clinton fans out there, and really what the ADA says is it prohibits discrimination based on disability, and that could be via segregation, or harassment, or failing or refusing to hire based on a perceived disability. All right. Now, what falls under the ADA? It's a pretty large list of things: ADHD, ASD, dyslexia, you name it. If it's some sort of mental disorder, even or physical disorder, there's kind of a boilerplate that is a coverall, right? What the ADA does is it requires covered entities to provide reasonable accommodations. So we've been talking about those reasonable accommodations. So they're actually required by law to give you those accommodations if you ask for them. However, there's a caveat. You must be working for a company that has 15 or more employees. And that's what the government states. Now, you may have some luck with a smaller company. In fact, you probably could have some luck with a small company, but the big players out there, they're all going to have to follow this law. This law is also what requires accessibility for public accommodation. So this is why you have handicap ramps and handicap stalls in bathrooms. It was a result of the Disabilities Act in 1990. Right. So now I'm going to talk about, I've talked about a good, now I'm going to talk about a bad. And for those of you guys who were here last year, you might have remembered this story. But I was working for an educational institution, which will remain nameless. And I had a boss who did not like me. He didn't like the way I did things, didn't like the way I had my own way of going about stuff. He had held my job previous to me. So he was promoted and I took his job. It was a constant, well, I don't do it that way. Why can't you do it that way? You need to do it this way. You need to do it that way. You need to do it this way. And it was constant. And we had problems. For a while, it was okay. And then we remodeled our data center. And I got a new office. And my desk was next to my boss. Sorry, not next to. I was facing away from him. So he could look over my shoulder every second of every day that I was working. Long story short, he wanted me gone. He hated me. He regretted hiring me. I didn't fit his mold. So I did what I had to do. My wife was on unemployment, going on almost 99 weeks at that point. This was during the market crash of '08, right? Everything went to crap. And I didn't have any options. I didn't have any other jobs lined up. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I made this decision that I didn't think anybody above my boss was going to be able to help me. So I went to HR. And so I made an official disclosure. This is your option of last resort, guys. Don't come out of the gate with this. While you technically can start with this, I would recommend not, because it could create a hostile environment for you, even more than it may already be. Some employers take this as a threat for some reason, and I don't know why. You're really just asking for accommodations so you could do your job for them better. Some things for official disclosure, if you have to go that route, it does require a formal diagnosis from a licensed practicing psychiatrist or psychologist. No social workers. That might be changed now. It also might depend on your employer too. But you have to provide that diagnosis to HR, so you have to hand them your life and say, hey, yeah, this is what I have. It's going to cause meetings, lots and lots of meetings with HR, with your supervisor, and it's not just initial meetings, it's going to be follow-up meetings. And one of the craziest things that happened in these meetings, you're going to discuss your accommodation expectations. And the regular follow-up. I'll finish up that story with, I was in a meeting with HR with my boss, and we were discussing accommodations. I had asked, for me, I had asked for noise-canceling headphones. Something pretty reasonable. That's a reasonable accommodation. Not going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not asking them to redesign entire computer systems around me. I'm asking them for something to help me focus a little bit better, right? My boss asked the HR representative in that meeting, so how long are we going to have to do this for? Which was the final nail in the coffin that he really had no clue and he really did not care. Because at that second, the HR lady says, well, forever. These are accommodations. This is not This is not us trying to help Roger keep his job. This is Roger has asked us for help, and we are legally required to give it to him. Right? It's taking me a very long time in my life, between those, that was probably the worst situation I've ever had. Maybe top 5 at least. To realize that I matter more, and that no job is worth it. And that finding something that is right for you is the most important thing you can do. And if it's not that job, then maybe you need to go find another one. Doesn't mean you need to go quit and go do it, but start looking. There are good people out there who do understand, who do listen, and who will help you. And that brings me to advocating for others. You can be that person too. All right. You can help a friend who maybe isn't in IT, who works somewhere else. Share this information with people. Let them know. A lot of us don't realize what's available to us. A lot of us are ashamed of what has happened of what's wrong with us. I suffered for many, many years with crippling depression and imposter syndrome, you name it, because I thought it wasn't good enough, because I thought my brain was broken, because I thought that the way I thought it was wrong, because everybody else thought this way. Everybody else had this path in life. Everybody else graduated high school and went straight to college for 4 years. I failed out my first semester because that's when I found out I had ADHD. Right? I went to community college for a few years. I entered the workforce for a number of years. Finally finished my degree in '06. Took me 11 years, but I got there. Just find your own path. This is something that's been a passion project of mine since I saw Jason's presentation 3 years ago. That I didn't realize how much wasn't known. How much people didn't know about their own heads, about their own lives. I've read books. We've all seen YouTube videos, TikToks, whatever. There's a lot of noise out there. But, these are kind of the core things. Just, if you need something, ask for something. And don't be afraid. And you are going to get a rejection. Sorry, it's the odds. Somebody's probably going to say no to you at some point in your life. Just keep trying. And eventually you'll land on your dream job. I get to work from home. I get to work with a great company. I get to work with a boss who understands me, who listens to me and wants to learn. So now we're actually going to open it up for some Q&A. And I left a lot of time. We got about 30 minutes or so. As I said, I didn't have a lot of slides because this session generally turns into a group therapy session. So, which is fine because you know what? We need to talk, right? I saw your hand up first. Oh no! I'm terrible throw. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I'm supposed to wait. Oh, there it is. Oh,
Yep.
I hate this. So first of all, thank you, because this is a really hard topic to talk about and to stand up in front of a bunch of people and do it. Bless you so much.
No idea.
And from what I'm understanding,
Okay.
to do it multiple years in a row. Yeah, exactly. So I kind of want to get your opinion and other people's if they want to on this thing. Like, the more I pay attention to the world, the more it feels like that between the stigmatization, the lack of education, the lack of diagnosis, that the idea of neurodivergent and neurotypical is kind of a false binary, because it feels to me like what we consider neurotypical is just one other piece of the giant pie of humanity. And I wanted to get your perspective on that, and anyone else that wanted to contribute, because that it feels to me like we force everything into a binary when everything really is a diversity, a divergence.
Yes.
So that's me.
So I'm going to answer that with a 90s reference. Anybody familiar with the movie Angus?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, Angus Bethune is a very heavyset gentleman in high school who gets picked on a lot, and he's smart, so he's different than everybody else. And one of the culminating moments in the film is he's doing a science presentation, and it's about surviving in a hostile environment, and that sometimes, occasionally, things will happen that causes the environment to change around you so that you can fit in. But the biggest outcome from that was there is no normal. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. You're right. It is not binary. And I think the reason they did neurotypical versus and neurodiverse is stigma from, just normal bias that exists. This was back in the 80s and 90s when they came up with this stuff. So it wasn't as diagnosed, especially in girls and women. It was also thought, you'd outgrow that. Oh yeah, by 18, it'll be gone. It'll be fine. You'll become functioning members of society and go on to the workforce. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that one. It is not that. But the way I look at it and the way I look at it, neurotypical is, take your bell curve, right? So that's a perfect example. So you have your group that exists within that bell curve, and then you have the people who exist outside of it. Neither is wrong. It's just the way we are. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we got.
Yes. Thank you. I had to laugh because last year when I did the presentation with Charles Mangan, we had the bell curve, and then we had a Taco Bell curve, and then a Kristen Bell curve. So when you said bell curve, I see what you did there. I didn't have a question. I mean, I always have a question, but I just wanted to say, your very last bit was advocating for others, and you standing up there and talking about it out loud in front of people, and then later in front of the internet, hi internet, makes it easier for the next person, which is part of why I stand up and talk about it, why I'm not secret, why I have a cute t-shirt about ADHD, is because every piece of that makes it easier for somebody in here to go, maybe that is me, maybe that is, and if you have a conversation with somebody, that is you advocating for somebody in the future, whoever it is, because you're talking to somebody and you have helped that person get diagnosed, you have helped that person understand a little better someone else who might be diagnosed or in the process, and every piece of that makes it easier for someone else. It is not fun for me. I know it's not fun for you. We've talked about it.
Yep.
It is not comfortable. It is not easy.
No,
but
it's not.
It's easier for me than it is for somebody in here who maybe is not as far along or not as comfortable or not as used to. And I mean, hi, woman in tech. I've been on the internet since the 90s. Let me talk to you about being uncomfortable and developing a thick skin.
Right.
Maybe that's my presentation next year. So, but every piece of that matters. And so the thing that, like, it's not always it doesn't have to be a grand gesture in order to be something that can be helpful for someone else. And I think especially for our people, the habaneros, that it makes it so every piece of that makes it a tiny bit easier for somebody in another way, and you don't always see that. It doesn't always pay off right away, but it always matters.
So speaking of payoffs, literally, I believe it was yesterday or the day before in the NeuroSpicy channel on Slack, somebody had posted that they were feeling very self-conscious and were having trouble, coming out of their shell here at the conference, and somebody posted my session from last year and said, hey, watch this. This really helped me. And that, I mean, it's probably the best feeling in the world. Like, wow, what I did mattered. And it wasn't a grand gesture. It was just me up here talking, rattling off some statistics.
Somebody told Charles yesterday to make sure and pass on to me, told him and said, make sure you tell Kelly that your session last year has made such a difference in my year, because I saw it in person and got to take that home with me, and my last year has been better as a result. So,
well, excellent.
See, every little bit helps.
Glad I could do that for somebody.
So I just turned 50, and I've known
Woo!
a bit, well,
All right.
in May, but still.
I'm getting closer. I'm on like 5 more years.
I've known I've been different, mentally for many, many years, and I've been tested, when I was in school. I mentioned 50 because back then they didn't know what they were testing for, I don't think, and it was all different stuff. And because I was verbal, I think it just moved me along, and people thought, I was just stupid and lazy. But, I got through it, and in college, specifically, I was actually at Penn State when I got my diagnosis initially of ADHD, and it was maybe about 4 or 5 years ago that I just saw a YouTube video about adults with autism, and I'm like, they're just talking about my normal day. And so what I found was there's like an industry of doctors just willing to rip people with autism off by charging like $2,000-3,000 to get diagnosed, and it's not covered by insurance and stuff like that. So, I kind of just, okay, I don't know what's gonna get me, so I kind of just let it slide. And obviously I told my family my thoughts, and my youngest daughter, who's now 16, being a 16-year-old, was like, unless you're diagnosed, you can't use that as an excuse, like, not that I was using an excuse, but
It's not an excuse.
Right.
It's an explanation.
Right. And what I found was I just ran into this company called Prosper Health, that they do everything online, and they take insurance. And so for $60, I was able to not only get my diagnosis, but my workplace accommodation stuff and stuff like that. So, and they're a really good group, and I'm not hawking them or anything, but like if you're trying to get diagnosed, that's a good way to do it. The other thing I had to bring up was I worked with somebody who was on Asperger's, and he was very toxic, like a really toxic person to work with, and somebody else at this convention.
Just because we're doesn't mean we're nice people.
Right, and that's, and so and like for I'd say about 4 or 5 years, we just kind of put up with it. Our team put up with it, and it got to a point where we finally got a new manager, and the new manager looked at us and said, there's something wrong here. And she recognized that the team dynamic was off, and she kind of pushed it, and she kind of made him kind of explain things, and kind of things, and it became a lot better. I mean, he ended up quitting, but like since he's been gone, the team dynamic has been so much better because we all understand each other so much better, and having him just was such a toxic thing, and we couldn't move forward because we couldn't move past that. And so like I tried to be understanding, being different myself, but like there's only so much I can help you. If you put yourself in a situation and you're pissing off the wrong people, I can't help you, so but yeah, I'm happy now, and so I appreciate this because this is really good. There's another session earlier about accessibility that was really, really well done, and I'm glad
I was in another session. Unfortunately, I'll have to check it out. But
this is my first time at the PSU Admins Conference. I used to go to JNUC, so I'm glad I came to this, and I'm glad.
Well, for those that are going to JNUC, you can see a slightly shortened version of this, or probably the same presentation at JNUC as well. So,
hi there.
Hello.
I just want to say first and foremost, everyone is absolutely different. No one is. There should be no criteria to fit everyone in one place because it's just not nonsensical. My biggest thing that I live by, and my parents have told me this my whole life, is that everyone is their own self. Everyone is their own normal. There is no set criteria everyone needs to follow. As much as society likes to do that, it doesn't make sense, unfortunately. It breaks things too much. And this is my first time being here. I've never been here before, and my job's wonderful. What was I going to say else? I got nervous.
it's okay. We've all been there. It's fine.
Building up to it, I got nervous. I'm like, oh God.
Oh please! I forgot like a third of what I was going to say on my presentation.
I remember now. ADHD moment. I heard you say that it took you 11 years to do college. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in and out of community colleges and other colleges for about 10 years before I finished my degree. Yeah.
And what was your degree?
I have a degree in computer networking.
And was that associates?
No, bachelor's.
Bachelor's.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Now ask me if I work in networking. Nope.
I wanted to ask about that and your personal perspective and how you got through that, because I had struggled, and I still haven't finished, and I kind of went off it for a while. How do you get through college from your perspective? Because I've tried so hard to get through that, and it was just like I kept hitting so many walls.
So most colleges of reasonable sizes, well, actually pretty much all colleges, will have a special education department within them, and that ADA, the ADA covers you at school as well. So you can request things like note takers as a really big one. You can request quiet rooms for exams, and that kind of thing. So for me, that was helpful. So once I failed out of college my first semester and I went back to community college, I started embracing some of those resources and started getting some of those, and they helped for an extent. And to be honest, man, I took 5 years off and just worked. Like, this college thing isn't for me. I don't really want to do this, and I just started working. And then it got to the point where, like, hey, I want to make more money than I'm making. I need a degree. So that was my motivation to go and finish. And that again comes back to the hyperfocus. The hyperfocus doesn't necessarily have to be like, ooh, I'm looking at this screen. That hyperfocus for me was, I'm going to finish my goddamn degree. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to be the only person in my extended family who doesn't have a degree, because my cousins have degrees. One of my cousins he's at University of Michigan, but he was an associate professor at Stanford. So the other one is a doctor, anesthesiologist. And then there's little me. And, my sister has a master's and 2 bachelor's degrees. So for me, I felt like I didn't live up to what I should be. And so that was my motivation. And I was working full time, 40 hours, and I was doing night classes. I was taking about 14 credit hours at night classes. And I just barreled through, and I did it in finished everything within about just under 2 years. With all the transfers I was able to get in for credits.
That's great.
You just kind of gotta, it's hard to get started. And there were false starts, I mean, I in and out of community college, at one point I thought about going back to the college that I failed out of for a hot second, and don't give up. It's hard to get going, but the benefit was for me was I felt I actually finished this. I did this. This is great.
That's exactly the mindset that I want to feel, because I feel kind of stuck in that head of like, I didn't finish this. I so badly want to do this. I want to feel so accomplished and get further. And like you said,
it's the story of my life up until I was about 19. Was, hey, what is Roger going to quit this year? I would start things, never finish them. That was my thing. I would lose interest, or I get frustrated, and yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Just a quick thing to add.
Yeah.
When I went to Penn State, I was there for 5 years. Just barely got out of a 2.3 GPA.
Hey, passing's passing.
And when I finished, whatever I just learned, because I learned management information system, nothing really mattered anymore because the internet came out. 10 years later, I wanted to get a degree, and thankfully work was able to help pay for it, which is, I think, to look into as well. But I did it all online with the University of Phoenix, and I got a 3.7 GPA. So
yeah,
that's
another good thing. Is like, online universities,
right.
They may have had a bad rap in the past, but the ones that are affiliated with legitimate colleges, not these, New Hampshire or whatever, that one that's online only, whatever. But you'll find a lot of major colleges, including Penn State, most of the state schools, the big schools, they have an online program where you can get your degree completely online without stepping foot in a classroom.
Yeah, so real quickly about school. So I finished my degree in 2017, and I don't have a really complex diagnosis history, although I'm clearly ADHD. One of the best things for accommodations I got as a student was extended time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sorry, I forgot about that one.
Because a lot of
Yeah,
us
that's a good
also
one.
have undiagnosed learning disabilities. And that extra time, it made the difference between me actually passing basic college math and completely failing it.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
one
I
other
probably have
thing,
dyscalculia.
one other thing to remember is,
Yeah,
yeah,
extra time will help you out a lot.
yeah. And this also comes for self-advocacy. Talk to your professors, too. You'll find that a large number of them are absolutely willing to meet with you in office hours, give you some extra help, give you printouts of slides or whatever you need. But you got to ask. They're not mind readers.
And I threw a link in the notes for the session
Oh, nice.
for the Job Accommodation Network, which was funded by a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor. So that's where some of the U.S. tax dollars have gone in the past. But it's a super great resource for, like, if you can go look by condition, or you can look by accommodation type and find accommodations that would be suitable for you. Like, they were trying to move my office into, like, I have a private office now, and they wanted to move me into a group work area. And I'm like, no, no, no. And then I didn't realize, like, a lot of the other things that I have as accommodations already, I felt kind of guilty about. But looking through the list, I discovered that my need to have outdoor light in the space was actually an accommodation for autism. The flexible schedule is actually an accommodation for both autism and for ADHD, right? Because as I told my boss, it allowed me to, like, decompress my day a little bit. So I would start work at 6:30 in the morning, and I quit work at 4. But in the meantime, like, I'm taking my breaks when I need them. So if I need to take a break and just get outside and walk the dog or something when I'm working from home, that's what I do.
Yep, that's a big one. That's
like
that's a huge thing for me too. It's those mental breaks are huge. Whether it's going out running an errand or taking the dog for a walk or, you know, playing a round of a game on my phone or something like that.
Yeah.
Something just to break the monotony.
We can't work for 8 hours a day with a 1-hour break.
Yep.
At the same time every day. Screw that. All right, relay.
Oh.
Oh, yes!
All right.
Just one other thing about finishing college. Do it really slowly. I have been working on finishing a bachelor's degree, you could say, for more than 13 years now. And a class is a class, even like you may be, you know, take one class and then need a semester or two to recharge. Like, that's still progress.
And credits transfer. Not
Not
all credits, but credits can transfer.
And if you end up taking too many classes and then not getting anything from it, that is actually the reverse of progress. So it feels, it sucks to, like, be moving so slowly, but I am moving at all, and I think that's pretty cool.
I've always considered myself somewhere between being neurodiverse and not being neurodiverse. But
It's not black or white. So.
I think advocacy or an accommodation was the worst word they could have ever used for somebody who's only asking for help. Because if they get the help, sometimes they don't know what it is, but if they can get that help, identify the help they need, get the employer to understand they need this help, and not make it an accommodation so everybody else who doesn't get this special treatment feels that may be including the boss and the boss's boss, that somehow, oh, we're having to treat these people differently. I'll give you an example of self-advocacy. I worked for a place that I didn't have a car, and I had a family, and if I took the one thing, well, I did have a car, but if I took that car, then my wife and my kids didn't have a car to go to the store or whatever else they needed to do. If she needed to take the kids to the doctor. So then I have to leave work. So what I would do is I'd get up at, I don't know what hour it was, I'd go to the bus station. It was like an hour ride, get to downtown Virginia, in Virginia, and wait for half an hour, get on another bus, and finally show up, I don't know, the length of this building away from where I worked. I had no control what time that bus got to that bus stop. But I started getting grief from a guy that's half my age. I wasn't this old then. But he was literally basically a teenager. And fine, he's got the boss position, whatever. But he started giving me grief. I'm sure he was getting it from his bosses about how I was 5 minutes late. I mean, really to the point where like, you have to do something about this because otherwise, I'm like, dude, I'll tell you what. I have no control, and I explained to him. I couldn't take it no more, so I finally explained to him what I went through every morning to just get to work. And then to work an 8-hour day, you know, be full of energy and whatever else to do my job, and I did it. And at that time, for like $6.50 an hour, you know, it was mechanical work, spray painting equipment, and whatever else they had me do. That wasn't the issue. The issue is you're going to give me grief about doing something happening that I have no control over. But until I self-advocated and told them, like, dude, this is what I go through just to get here.
Yep.
I have no control over it. Yeah. So if you, and I told them, if you have to fire me because I'm 5 minutes late, go ahead and do it. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do for a job if he fired me. But the point was, it was never going to get any better until I put, okay, here's my shoes. You wear them for 5 minutes, and you figure out how to do it.
I mean, there's been jobs in my history where I haven't even tried to advocate for myself. I read the room, you know, and I realized that, you know, it's not a fit for me, you know.
I do believe that sometimes that's the option, and try to find the room that you do fit into.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, life tends to get in the way of that sometimes, but yeah.
In one way or another, yes.
All right. Who else we got? Back there. Oh, wow. You can do it.
Okay.
You can relay it if you need.
I don't play sports.
You can relay it. All right. All right.
Hi, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Hey, all right.
I just want to piggyback on a couple of thoughts. First, 23 years for me to finish my bachelor's, so.
Hey, you got it done. That's good.
But I got it, so aces. Also about the extra time, especially with testing. Is anyone here from JAMF by chance? Oh, crap. Okay.
Yeah, that's been my biggest complaint too. Is I've now failed the 400 4 times because there's not enough time for me to finish it.
Thank you. Well,
really, I'll try that next time.
Oh, thank you.
I've done the 400, and yeah,
okay.
It's very hard, but yeah, I felt like, thankfully we had training pass, so I'm like, giving me a little bit of like, okay, if I fail, I can take it again, but it was very, very stressful.
Yeah, I mean, I took the 200 a couple years ago, and it was just this unbelievable fire hose of information.
Oh, yeah.
Great stuff, but I had, by the time it was done, I just couldn't process information anymore. And usually what I do, if I'm in a classroom situation, I'll take notes, get to the end, maybe rewrite them, because that's just how
it comes to environment. For me, it's environment.
Yeah.
The reason I struggle with the 400 these days is because it's not a class. It's not physical anymore. I'm an old CCE from back in the day, so dating myself. Version 10. Actually, no, sorry, version 9. Jeez. Okay. Forgetting my own history here. But yeah, back then, for those who have taken the CCE when it was still being offered, it was held pretty much primarily in the Minneapolis JAMF headquarters, and it was a class. All of us sitting in a classroom, closed environment, no distractions, versus tiny little window, video of, and then trying to focus on these slides over. It's not conducive. So I have that complaint. I have not voiced it with JAMF directly myself, but
yeah. In my case, the online format for the training worked fine for me. It was just the fact that I didn't have time to process the information, and then 5-day thing. Friday morning, more stuff, a lot of recapping, and then Friday afternoon was the test, which I failed miserably. Took the retest, I don't know, 3-4 months later, not a problem, because I had the time to work on my own notes and learn things.
Yep. Yeah, for me, it's just it's time constraints. Yeah, it should make me work better. It should put me into a hyper focus. But for me, especially when it comes to scripting, I'm very particular. I need to put noise canceling headphones on. I need to, You know, my environment needs to be perfect for me to really get into a hyper-focused state on scripting. I enjoy scripting, but I don't enjoy it that much. So it's one of those things like, oh, yeah, all this API stuff. And so everybody's different. But yeah, for me now, when I take that class, and I take it every couple of years, I go into it, and sometimes I'll take the exam, sometimes I won't. You know, it's an optional exam. You don't have to get the certification. I don't need a piece of paper that says I know this stuff, because I know this stuff. I've been doing it for 12 years.
Yeah, and I would love to go for the 300, but it's that testing thing that's really holding me back. But
Yeah.
if they do accommodate, that gives me hope.
Yep.
Thank you.
Because I took I think the 200, 300, and 400 both online, because I had the CCA back in the day, and then they switched. With the online format, I found that like the class would be like from 9 to 5, and then I'd spend about 2 more hours after just going over what I learned. So I would absorb, you know, what I learned, and I would create like a beta Jamf Pro server so I could practice on, and that way, you know, I could do it. Now with the 400, it is insane. I mean,
Yes.
it's super insane, and like my brain felt like mush at the end of the day. But I still, you know, spent a couple hours after each class just getting it down, and I think that helped me quite a bit because, you know, thankfully I was able to pass it the first time. And now, you know, where I work, we have 4 people with a 400, so you know it's not easy. And I think if anybody did fail, like we should make fun of them the whole time. I mean, it's one of those bruising things, but it's not an easy test. I think in our, you know, environment, it's the hardest test you could probably take. You know, at our level, because you know we're not doctors. It's the equivalent to whatever the bar exam is and all that stuff. So
CCIE, all that stuff, yeah.
it's hardcore, but stick with it. You know, and definitely, you know, take your time. I think having a training pass kind of helped me out a little bit, because I knew if I failed it, I could just take it again later on in the year, and I would be able to study more like you did. You know, so but yeah.
Nice. Anybody else? We got there's some in the back. Wow, we got a lot of people. All right. Just so you guys know, we're about 8 minutes left. So.
Okay, I'll keep it tight. I think that what I've learned about myself over the years is that I don't understand things, and I've learned to turn that into a professional career of explaining things, because not understanding things has required me to expend effort into understanding the order that things happen in, what prevents things from happening in that way. And that's what's helped me in my tech support career, understanding what the order of operations is, understanding what can affect those things, understanding how people describe things when they themselves don't understand what's happening, which is how most tech support requests come in. Because if they actively knew how to describe things, they would know enough to understand
how to
which
fix
part is
it.
not
Exactly,
working.
yeah. They would never get to our level if they knew how to fix it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this, yes, with extra exclamation points always. But learning how to describe things, learning how to document things, those are areas where I can bring value to many organizations. Where things get less than pleasant in my organization is when I ask for additional details, because things are being glossed over, or I'm concerned that they have not been thoroughly thought through before going into being executed.
So that need for the details,
the clarity, because I want to believe that other people have given enough thought to this before they've asked me to start doing things about it. Not that they're just saying, yeah, go do the thing.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, to have that conversation with your potentially less affected bosses. And
I mean, Zane and I have had conversations about that. It's like, hey, what's the reality of this? Is this really going to, you know, like, who thought this up? Where did this come from? And
have they thought it through? Because I can think of 5 potential ways this isn't going to work.
Yeah, and that was one of our pain points. That was probably one of the biggest things that we butted heads on at first, which is he didn't understand that my need to know this wasn't any sort of judgment or anything like that. It was literally like, my brain needs to know the background for it to be able to process it properly.
Right, and most specifically, it's not intended to be a challenge to authority.
Exactly.
It's intended to, I want to provide the best possible answers for you so that you can have success with this for your own boss.
Yep.
And I'm ready to do that.
I phrase it as like, I'm playing devil's advocate here. You know, I'm
right.
You know, If it was me, if it was my decision, if it was my money, I'd do it this way.
The most recent conversation I've had, I had to bring forth an analogy that the way my boss likes to think about things and work on things is like cooking. Stirring a steaming pot of whatever they're making, tasting it, figuring out what additional things need to be adjusted as things progress. I said, my brain works much more like a baker. I need the ingredients, I will measure them appropriately, I will combine them in the right way, I will produce the result, and it will be consistent every time. But we just come at things from different points of view, and that I want to make sure that they are aware that I respect what they do, but I'm requesting a little bit of respect in the way I think about things too.
Yeah, and that's self-efficacy. You know, you got to be able to speak up, and as we all know, sometimes it doesn't end well, but a lot of times it does. You know.
Hello.
What's up, Charles?
Yeah, good. Charles here, double university dropout, absolutely riddled with ADHD. Sorry, that sounded weird, didn't it? My question was more... It's in the accent. All right, sorry. Yeah, first time here. So I had a question more sort of directly at yourself or anyone else in the room. Is there anything you've done within your kind of workplaces or businesses where you're able to talk to other people in a community style around neurodiversity and come together and just discuss?
Yeah. So McGraw-Hill celebrates diversity, and one of the things I've talked about with my director at some point is I might want to start something that deals with like a neurodiversity section. We have LGBTQ, we have all sorts of other groups, women in tech and all that stuff. But yeah, no, I mean that's a great way to advocate for others, you know. And if your company's willing to allow you to do that, or set up that resource, even if it's just a Slack channel, where people can chat, it's a good thing.
Do you find it really helpful?
I've never been at a place that had a specific group for me, but I mean, I don't know. It could be. I mean, I would assume it would be because me talking about this stuff here helps. So being able to talk about it in an open environment would also help. We're down to about 3 minutes. We probably got time for one more. And I also wanted to, Mike.
I'd probably have a better job if I kicked it from the floor, being
So while that's being thrown around before we get to that last question, up here I got a resource page on GitHub where I've put some stuff. It's mostly stuff from last year, but I'm going to put the recording for this. I'm also open to any pull requests. If anybody wants to add anything to it, please feel free to send that. Also the session feedback. And then down here's got the link to the NeuroSpicy group on Slack, on the Mac Admin Slack. So we're all very friendly. And yeah, but before everybody goes, I just want to make sure we get to the point. It's like different doesn't mean broken. It just means different. And that's the bottom line. So, we got time for that one more?
Okay, so I'm just going to say, people, you'll have issues and you'll want people to respect your issues, but you got to look around and you got to understand that everybody has different things, whether they're introverts or they're, just don't like to do certain things, or they're uncomfortable doing certain things, or they're, everybody has it. And just look for those things in people and just have empathy towards that, and then they will pay it back. If you're upset because someone understands you, you understand that they also have things that you don't understand. And if you can just pay that back and just talk to people and understand where they're coming from, even if it's not where you come from, and then it just kind of makes it a little easier. And when you do say, yeah, I can't do that, they don't go, well, you give me no leeway.
Yeah.
Why would I not give you
And
leeway?
yeah, that goes back to the creating that hostile environment. If you ask for too much too quickly, or if you go about the wrong way, you can draw some ire from your coworkers, like, why are you getting this and I'm not, kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah. Come see me at JNUC, where you can get another group therapy session. So for a little bit more money, but yeah.